Have you ever felt like your perfect life is actually a gilded cage? That you have everything money can buy, but nothing your heart needs? This is the story of Valentina Mendoza, a woman who had everything and nothing at the same time, until a broken down Ferrari and a 4-year-old boy changed absolutely everything. If you're ready for a story that will make you believe in destiny, stay until the end because what you're about to hear could change your perspective on life. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Valentina Mendoza had learned from a young age that nothing in this world is given to you for free. Born in the humble Vallecas neighborhood of Madrid, the daughter of Mexican immigrants who had crossed the ocean with more dreams than money in their pockets. She grew up sharing a tiny room with 3 older brothers and sleeping on a mattress that cracked every time she moved. Her father, Miguel, worked as a bricklayer under the relentless Spanish sun, coming home each night with cracked hands and a broken back. Her mother, Rosa, cleaned other people's houses, scrubbing the floors of wealthy families while her own children waited at home with unsupervised homework and makeshift dinners. But Rosa had a sign she repeated like a mantra whenever Valentina complained about how little they had. My dear, poverty isn't a sentence, it's just a starting point. You decide where you end up. And Valentina decided she would end up very, very far from that small apartment where hot water was a luxury and vacations meant going to the neighborhood park. At 16, while her friends were out clubbing and chasing boys, Valentina studied until her eyes burned. Math, physics, computer science, anything that could open doors to a better future. At 18, she landed a partial scholarship to university and a job at a small tech company that barely paid enough for transportation and the coffee she needed to stay awake. She slept 4 hours a night, lived on cheap supermarket sandwiches, and never, ever complained because she knew that every sacrifice brought her one step closer to the life she had promised her parents. And they did it. Good heavens, how they did it. At 25, she founded her own software company with the savings she had accumulated working as a slave for years. By 30, her startup had revolutionized the cybersecurity sector with technology that protected data for international corporations. At 32, she sold that company for 150 million euros and became one of the richest women in Spain, a success story that newspapers love to tell, from Vallecas to the top. The businesswoman who conquered Silicon Valley from Madrid. She bought a spectacular penthouse in the exclusive Salamanca district, with windows overlooking the Retiro Park and ceilings so her voice echoed when she spoke to herself, which happened more often than she cared to admit. She bought a red Ferrari, the same car she had dreamed of since childhood, watching Hollywood movies on the broken television at home. She traveled first class, dined in Michelin-starred restaurants where a single bottle of wine cost more than her father's monthly salary when he was alive. But her parents were no longer there to see him. Her father had died of a massive heart attack when she was 27, just as she was beginning to earn enough money to care for him as he deserved. Valentina had paid for the best cardiologists, the best private clinic, but Miguel's heart was too weary from so many years of hard work. Her mother followed him 2 years later, not from illness, but from sheer grief. The doctor listed heart failure on the death certificate, but Valentina knew the truth. Rosa simply couldn't live without Miguel, her partner of 40 years, her reason for having crossed the ocean. Now Valentina was 35 years old and had all the money she had ever dreamed of having, but when she woke up every morning in her king-size bed with Egyptian sheets worth 1,000 euros. The first thing she felt was an emptiness so deep it could swallow the whole world. That Friday in August, she was driving toward Toledo for a crucial meeting with international investors. She had chosen the back road instead of the highway because driving her Ferrari along winding roads was one of the few genuine pleasures she allowed herself. The engine roared with a power that reminded her that at least something in her life responded when she demanded it. The Castilian landscape stretched out on either side, golden fields scorched by the summer sun, centuries-old olive trees twisted by time, with villages that seemed frozen in some bygone era. It was beautiful, yes, but Valentina barely noticed. Her mind was already on the meeting, calculating figures, anticipating questions, building strategies. She was always 3 steps ahead, always planning her next move. It was the only way she knew how to exist. Then the engine made a noise she'd never heard before. A metallic, almost human bile, as if the car were planning. Valentina frowned and slowed down, but before she could come to a complete stop, the Ferrari lurched violently, then again, and suddenly the engine used, died. The car slid to a halt on the shoulder, coughing black smoke from the hood like a dying dragon. No, 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 Valentina muttered, hitting the steering wheel in frustration. This can't be happening. Not today. She stepped out of the car in her €500 low-bottom heels, her silk Hermes blouse, and her designer skirt, completely unsuitable for being stranded on a back road in the middle of nowhere. The Augustiad hit her like a slap in the face. The asphalt radiated at waves that distorted the air. She opened the hood, and a cloud of smoke made her recoil, coughing. She pulled out her latest generation iPhone, hoping to solve this with a simple call. No signal. She walked a few meters in each direction, holding the phone up to the sky as if that would miraculously conjure up the signal bars. Nothing. She was completely isolated. She sat on the ground next to her useless Ferrari, not caring that her €2,000 skirt was getting stained with roadside dust, and for the first time in years she allowed herself to feel something akin to despair. Here she was, the great Valentina Mendoza, the woman who had conquered the business world, the one who had risen from poverty to build an empire, completely helpless because a car had broken down. That's when I saw it. A small boy, no more than 4 years old, was walking alone along the shoulder of the road. He was wearing a blue and white striped t-shirt, worn denim shorts, and trainers that had seen better days. In his hand, he held a small toy car that, ironically, was also red. The boy walked with the confidence of someone who knew the way, but Valentina immediately stood up, alarmed. A child so young shouldn't be alone on a road. She looked around for an adult, any adult, but there was no one. Only empty fields, the merciless sun, and this boy approaching her with curiosity in his large brown eyes. The little boy stopped in front of her and stared at the Ferrari with obvious fascination. Then he looked at the smoke still rising from the hood. Finally, he looked up at Valentina and, in a clear and confident voice, said the words that would change her life forever. "My dad can fix it." Valentina looked at the boy, torn between multiple conflicting emotions. On the one hand, she was genuinely worried, what was such a young child doing walking alone along a road? On the other hand, there was something in those brown eyes, in the absolute confidence with which she had spoken those words, that stirred a strange feeling in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. "What's your name?" Valentina asked, crouching down to be at the child's level, ignoring how her knees were protesting in that uncomfortable position with heels. "Lucas," the boy replied with that particular pride that young children have when introducing themselves, as if his name were the most important in the world. "And you?" "Valentina," she answered, unable to help but smile at the little boy's formality. "Lucas, where is your dad?" The boy pointed to a dirt track leading off the main road, barely visible among the old oaks and pines that lined the area. The track disappeared into the trees like a dusty snake. "There," Lucas said with absolute certainty. "My dad has a garage. He fixes cars. Lots of cars. Cars of all colors and sizes." He gestured widely with his little arms to emphasize the magnitude. "He's the best car fixer in the whole world. Better than anyone. I'm sure he can fix your red car too." Valentina looked where the boy was pointing. She couldn't see any workshops, any buildings, used trees and more trees and that dirt road that seemed to lead nowhere. But she didn't have many options. Her phone was useless, her car was dead, and she couldn't just sit on the side of the road waiting for someone to pass. Besides, and this was the most important thing, this boy was alone, and she couldn't just leave him like that. It didn't matter who she was, where she came from, or how much money she had in the bank. No child should be alone on a road. "Will you take me to see your dad?" Valentina asked. Lucas' face lit up with a ugly smile that revealed a gap where he was missing a front tooth. He extended his small hand toward her without a hint of hesitation or mistrust, simply waiting for her to take it. Valentina felt something break in her chest when those little fingers closed around hers. It was pure, simple, uncomplicated trust. A child who knew nothing about her except that she needed help, offering that help without asking for anything in return. When was the last time someone had offered her something without expecting something back in return? They walked together along the dirt path. Valentina was desperately trying not to ruin her €500 heels on the uneven, rocky, and potholed terrain. Lucas chattered incessantly, as children his age do, jumping from one topic to another with the chaotic logic of childhood. My dad is really good at fixing things, she said, balancing her toy car as they walked. He also fixed Mr. Martinet's tractor, which was completely broken. He also fixed my friend Carmen's bicycle when she fell and it all bent. And he also fixed my teddy bear, whose eye popped out, and my dad put a new button on it, and it was better than before. It sounds like a very skilled dad, Valentina commented, surprised to find herself genuinely interested in this child's conversation. Yes, Lucas agreed vehemently. He's the best dad in the world. He makes me pancakes on Sundays and reads me stories before bed and teaches me about cars. Look, my toy car is red like yours. Isn't it pretty? Very nice, Valentina agreed, and realized that he really meant it. Do you have children? Lucas asked, with that lack of filter that small children have. The question hit Valentina harder than she expected. No, she replied, her voice coming out softer than she intended. I don't have children. Why not? Lucas looked at her with genuine curiosity, not malicious, just trying to understand the world like all children do. Valentina didn't know how to answer that question. How could she explain to a 4-year-old boy that she had been so busy building an empire that she had forgotten to build a life? That she had had so many disappointments with men that she had decided it was safer to be alone? That sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night in her empty attic and feel such a depache at the absence of children's voices that she had to get up and work until dawn just to avoid thinking about it? I guess it was never the right time, he finally said, which was both true and a lie. Lucas seemed to consider this seriously. My mom is gone, he said after a moment, with that matter-of-fact way little children talk about ugly things. She went to heaven when he was a baby. Dad says she loved me very much, but she got really sick, and the doctors couldn't make her better. Sometimes he gets sad because he don't remember her, but Dad tells me it's okay to be sad and Dad's always watching over me from up there. Valentina felt her throat close up. This little boy, who couldn't have been more than 4 years old, was talking about the loss of his mother with an acceptance that she, at 35, still hadn't reached with the death of her own parents. Your dad is right, she managed to say. It's okay to be sad sometimes. Are you sad sometimes too? Lucas asked, looking at her with eyes too wise for his age. Yes, Valentina admitted, and it was the most honest truth she had spoken in a long time. Sometimes I'm very sad. Lucas squeezed his hand a little tighter. When I'm sad, that gives me hugs. Hugs help a lot. Do you want me to give you a hug? And before Valentina could answer, this little boy she had just met let go of her hand and hugged her around the waist with all the strength his small body could muster. It was such a pure gesture, so devoid of ulterior motives, that Valentina felt tears stinging her eyes for the first time in years. She bent down and returned the hug, holding this strange child who was offering her comfort without asking for anything in return, and thought that maybe her Ferrari hadn't broken down by accident. Maybe the universe had plans she couldn't see yet. The workshop appeared after about a 10-minute walk. It was a modest building, clearly an old farmhouse converted into a mechanic's garage. Several old cars were parked outside in various stages of repair, an 80s Seat without a hood, a Renault with its wheels removed, a dusty van. A hand-painted sign, fading in the sun, read Taller Mecánico Navarro, Navarro Mechanical Workshop, in irregular letters that suggested someone had painted it themselves without professional help. The sound of tools came from inside, the metallic clang of hammer, the whir of some kind of machine, the clinking of keys and screws. It was the sound of honest work, of physical effort, so different from the elegant silence of the corporate offices where Valentina spent most of her time. Dad! Lucas shouted, letting go of Valentina's hand and running towards the workshop. Dad! He found a lady with a broken red car. A man emerged from the workshop, wiping his hands with a grease-stained rag. And Valentina Mendoza, who had negotiated with international CEOs without flinching, who had presented to Silicon Valley investors without a hint of nerve. Who had built an empire with sheer determination and had never let herself be intimidated by anyone, felt as if the world had stopped completely. Daniel Navarro wasn't the type of man who usually appeared on Valentina Mendoza's radar. He didn't wear bespoke Italian suites or Rolex watches that cost more than a car. He hadn't studied at prestigious business schools, nor did he speak with that cosmopolitan accent acquired by people who constantly travel between European capitals. He wasn't a part of her world at all. But God, he was handsome. Not with that polished, artificial beauty that comes from expensive products and elite gyms, but with something much more fundamental. He was in his mid-30s, with dark hair tousled from work, and a few days, proud of beard framing a strong howling. His eyes were a deep green, the color of leaves in spring, and they looked at her with a mixture of curiosity, concern, and something else that Valentina couldn't quite put her finger on. She wore blue overalls stained with grease and oil, and worn work boots that had seen years of hard use. Her hands showed the signs of physical labor, calluses, small scars, the weathered skin of someone who set their hands to earn a living. They weren't the soft hands of the executives she usually dealt with. But there was something about him. The way his first reaction was to look at his son, making sure Lucas was okay before even looking at the stranger who had arrived with him. The way his shoulders relaxed when he saw the boy was happy and excited. The way he crouched down to Lucas' eye level when the little boy started explaining about the broken red car on the road. Dad, her car is red like mine, Lucas said, showing him his toy. And it's smoking and it's tapped and she needs help and he told her you could fix it because you fixed everything, right Dad? Daniel smiled, and that smile completely transformed his face. Well, he don't know if he can fix everything, champ, but he can try. Then he sat up and looked at Valentina, and she felt that his gaze was truly seeing her, not just her expensive clothes or her carefully crafted appearance, but something deeper. Daniel Navarro, he introduced himself, extending a hand. Then he withdrew it when he saw it was stained with grease. Sorry, he was working on an engine. Valentina Mendoza, she replied, and normally she would have added her title here, CEO of Mendoza Tech, founder of SecureNet Solutions, as she had been trained to do in every introduction. But something about this place, this man, this moment, made those credentials seem unnecessary. My Ferrari broke down on the highway. Your son found me and, well, he said you could fix it. Daniel looked at Lucas with a mixture of pride and exasperation. Lucas, I've told you 1,000 times you shouldn't go out on the road alone. It's dangerous. But Dad, the boy protested with unwavering childlike logic, the lady needed help and he knew where you were. It's okay. Daniel sighed, but Valentina could see the absolute love in his eyes. We'll talk about this later, young man. But first, let's see that car. He looked at Valentina. A Ferrari, you say? I don't see many of those around here. I imagine not, Valentina replied with a wry smile. It's about a 10-minute walk down that road, on the main highway. Lucas, Daniel said, go inside and get my big toolbox. The black one with the red tape. Yes. Lucas ran off towards the workshop, happy to have an important mission. Daniel looked at Valentina more closely now that they were alone. Is she all right? Did she hurt herself or anything? The question took her by surprise. When was the last time someone had asked her if she was okay, not for her business or her investments, but for her as a person? I'm fine, she replied. Just frustrated. I had an important meeting in Toledo this afternoon. Well, let's see what we can do, said Daniel as Lucas came back dragging a toolbox that looked almost as big as a was. Daniel took it effortlessly. Shall we? They walked back along the dirt road, the three of them together. Lucas was between them, holding his father's hand in one and his toy car in the other, telling Daniel all about the adventure of finding the lady with the broken car. Valentina watched father and son interact, the easy way they communicated, the jokes they shared, the obvious love between them. It was something she had never experienced, not even when her parents were alive. They loved her, of course, but they had always been so tired, so overwhelmed by the struggle to survive, that expressions of affection like this had been rare. When they reached the Ferrari, Daniel whistled softly. Now that's a beautiful car. A 488 pista, isn't it? Valentina blinked, surprised. Yes. Do you know about Ferraris? Daniel smiled as he placed the toolbox on the ground. I used to be a mechanical engineer in Madrid. I worked designing engine systems for luxury cars. I know these engines well. I walked over to the hood, which was still open. Maggie. Please, Valentina said, stepping aside. Daniel leaned over the engine, his hands moving with precision and confidence, touching different parts, checking connections, listening intently. Lucas sat on the floor next to Valentina, watching his father work with obvious admiration. My dad is very smart, Lucas whispered to Valentina. He knows everything about cars. I can see that, Valentina murmured, and found herself equally fascinated watching Daniel work. After several minutes, Daniel sat up and wiped his hands on his rag. His expression was serious but not worried. It's the cooling system. One of the main hoses has a large leak. That's why the engine overheated. It's not catastrophic, but it needs to be repaired before I can drive it again. Can you fix it? Valentina asked, and she had the almost desperate tone in her own voice. I can, Daniel said, but not here and not now. I need to tow the car to the garage and get the right parts. A Ferrari isn't like any other car. The hoses have to be specific, original, or at least very high quality. Y ella have to call a distributor, probably in Madrid. Hopefully, I can have the parts tomorrow, but more likely the day after. Valentina felt her perfectly organized plan crumbling. 2 days. I'm sorry, Daniel said, and seemed genuinely remorseful. I wish she could do it faster. Valentina closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and accepted the inevitable. Okay. It's not his fault. Can you tow it then? Of course. I have a crane at the workshop. Daniel glanced at his watch. I can bring it in about 20 minutes. In the meantime. He hesitated, as if unsure whether to continue. In the meantime, if you need to make calls or rearrange your schedule, you can use the phone in my office at the workshop. And if you need a place to stay while we wait for the parts, there is a spare room at my house that no one uses. It's not a 5-star hotel, he added with a wry smile, but it has a clean bed and a private bathroom. Valentina looked at him, searching for any hint of ulterior motives, and he saying that this offer came with hidden conditions. But all she saw in his green eyes was simply honesty and a genuine desire to help someone in need. Why, she asked before she could stop herself. She don't know me. Why would she help me like this? Daniel seemed genuinely confused by the question. Because he needs help, he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. And because Lucas is right, he can usually fix things. He smiled. Besides, my son has clearly already decided you're his new best friend. If he rejected him now, he'd never forgive me. Upon hearing this, Lucas nodded vehemently. That's right. He already liked you a lot, Valentina. You have to stay. And Valentina Mendoza, who had built walls so big around her ear that she didn't even realize they were there, felt those walls begging to crack a little. Okay, she finally said. I accept your offer. Thank you. You're welcome, Daniel replied. Now let me go get the crane. Lucas, will you stay with Valentina and make sure she don't get lost? Yes, Dad. Lucas took Valentina's hand firmly. Ella take care of her. And as Daniel walked back to the garage, Valentina stood on the road with a 4-year-old boy holding her hand, staring at her wrecked Ferrari, and wondering how it was possible that on the worst day of her year, she felt more alive than she had felt in years. Daniel Navarro's house was everything Valentina had expected and exactly what she had unknowingly been needing. It was small, modest, a traditional Castilian stone building with white walls and dark wooden beams on the ceiling. It didn't have the impeccable design of her penthouse in Salamanca or the spectacular views of the Retiro Park. There was no contemporary art on the walls or carefully selected designer furniture. Instead, there was life. Photos of Lucas everywhere, documenting every stage of his short life, a wrinkled baby in his father's arms at the hospital, a 1-year-old with birthday cake even in his hair, Lucas learning to ride a bike with training wheels. Lucas on his first day of school. Childish drawings stuck to the refrigerator with colorful magnets, scribbles that were supposed to be cars, houses with Uge, smiling suns, a stick figure family that Valentina assumed was Lucas and his father. There were books piled on the tables, children's stories mixed with technical manuals on mechanics, mystery novels next to cookbooks stand with Uge. There was a crumpled knitted blanket on the sofa, as if someone had recently slept there. There were small shoes by the door, a collection of toy cars in a wicker basket, a half-finished puzzle on the dining table. It was a home, not a house. And Valentina felt such a strong pang of envy that it almost took her breath away. That afternoon, after Daniel had towed the Ferrari to the garage and Valentina had made her calls cancelling meetings and rearranging her schedule, she found herself sitting in the kitchen of that small house watching Daniel prepare dinner while Lucas played with his cars at her feet. "I hope you like lentils," said Daniel, stirring a pot that smelled incredibly good. "It's not fancy food, but it's what we have." "I love lentils," Valentina replied, and it was true. Her mother used to make lentils when she was a child, in that small apartment in Vallecas. The smell brought back such vivid memories that she felt a lump in her throat. "Really?" Daniel looked at her in surprise. "I thought someone who drives a Ferrari probably only ate at fancy restaurants." "I grew up eating lentils," Valentina said softly. "My mother made them at least once a week because they were cheap and fed us all. I haven't at home made lentils in, God, it must be more than 10 years." Daniel stopped from mahing and looked at her more closely. "Where are you from, Valentina? If you don't mind me asking." And so began the conversation that would change everything. Valentina told him about Vallecas, about her immigrant parents, about sharing a room with 3 siblings, about how she had vowed to escape that life of poverty and had succeeded, but at a cost she was only now beginning to understand. Daniel listened without interrupting, without judging, simply present in a way Valentina hadn't experienced in years. When she finished, served the lentils on 3 plates, a small one for Lucas with dinosaur drawings on it, and they sat down at the table like a family. "My story is different but similar," Daniel said as they ate. "I don't come from poverty, but I do come from loss." And then told her about Elena. His wife had been a literature professor, a woman who loved books almost as much as she loved her family. She wrote poetry in her spare time, verses about love and life and the ordinary beauty of everyday life. Daniel had kept all her notebooks, every poem, every word she had written. They had been happy. Stupidly, naively happy, the kind of happiness that makes you believe nothing bad can happen to you because love is protection enough against the world. They had an apartment in Chambéry, hopes they loved, a beautiful son, and plans for more children, more adventures, more years together. Then Elena started feeling tired. Just tired, they talked, from work, taking care of Lucas, and everyday life. When she finally went to the doctor, it was too late. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, no real treatment options, just time to say goodbye. 6 weeks. That was all the time they had from the diagnosis until Elena died in a hospital bed, holding Daniel's hand and whispering that she loved him, that the soul take care of Lucas, that she should be happy again someday. Lucas was 2 years old. Old enough to notice that his mother was gone, young enough not to understand why. For months he had asked for her, searching for her in every room, crying at night when Daniel put him to bed because he wanted his mother to sing him the lullabies only she knew. "I couldn't stay in Madrid," Daniel said, his voice rasping with emotion. "Every street, every park, every cafe where we'd been together felt like a knife to the earth. So I sold the apartment, quit my job, and bought this workshop in the middle of nowhere. Not because I particularly wanted to be a mechanic, but because I needed a place to start over, a place to raise my son without Elena's ghost lurking around every corner." "But she's still here," Valentina observed gently, looking at the photos on the walls. She'll always be here, Daniel agreed. Says Lucas' mother. I'm not going to pretend she never existed. But there's a difference between remembering and living in the past. Eve spent 2 years learning that difference. Lucas had finished his dinner and was now playing on the floor with his toy cars, making engine sounds with his mouse, completely oblivious to the adults' heavy conversation. Valentina watched him, this little boy who had lost his mother so young and yet radiated so much joy, so much trust in the world. How does he do it? Valentina asked. How does he raise a child alone, work, and still seem to have it all under control? Daniel let out a humorless laugh. Keep him under control? Half the time I have no idea what I'm doing. Lucas eats way too many chicken nuggets, probably watches more TV than is old, and there are days when I go to bed wondering if I'm completely ruining this kid. But I try. Every day I get up and try, and apparently that's enough. That's more than enough, Valentina said, looking at Lucas. That child is special. You can tell is full of love. Thank you, Daniel smiled, and the worms in his eyes made something flutter in Valentina's stomach. It's the best thing he ever did. The only thing he did right, I'd say. I don't think that's true, Valentina gestured around. This home says created, this life says building for him, it's something beautiful. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. And you, Valentina? What do you have in your life besides your job and the Ferrari? The question was simple, but the answer was devastating in its honesty. Nothing, Valentina admitted. Absolutely nothing. And as the words came out of her mouth, as she saw the understanding and empathy in Daniel's eyes, as Lucas approached and showed her his favorite toy car with the confidence that she would appreciate that gesture, Valentina Mendoza realized something fundamental. She had spent her entire life building the wrong kind of empire. She had conquered the business world but had lost the ability to simply live. She had amassed millions but was starved for human connection. She had proven she could achieve anything she set her mind to, except the one thing that truly mattered, being happy. That night, lying in Daniel's guest room, in a bed that didn't cost 10,000 euros but was infinitely more comfortable than her own. Listening to the soft sounds of this unfamiliar house that somehow felt more like home than her elegant penthouse, Valentina made a decision. She wasn't going to waste this opportunity. She didn't know exactly what this opportunity meant or where it was leading, but for the first time in years, she was willing to find out. For the first time in years, she was ready to open her heart again. What was supposed to be 2 days turned into 5, and Valentina discovered that she didn't mind at all. The Ferrari specialist was having trouble getting the right parts from Italy. There were shipping delays, customs issues, and technical excuses that would normally have infuriated Valentina. But now, when Daniel called with updates apologizing for the delays, she found herself saying, "Don't worry, there is no rush," and she meant it. She cancelled more meetings. She delegated more responsibilities to her executive team, competent people she had hired precisely for these moments but whom she had never trusted enough to let work without her constant supervision. She discovered that her company didn't collapse without her overseeing every detail. In fact, it functioned perfectly well. His days took on a completely different rhythm than anything he had experienced in the last decade. She woke up early, not because an alarm jolted her awake, but because the sunstream through the guest room window and the birds were singing outside. She showered in the small bathroom with its old tiles and towels that smelled of cheap fabric softened but were soft and cozy. He went down to the kitchen where Daniel was already preparing breakfast for Lucas. Pancakes on Sundays, as the boy had promised. Toast with tomato and olive oil on weekdays. Coffee that wasn't some expensive artisanal blend but simple supermarket coffee, but it tasted better than anything he'd had in years because he drank it in company, with conversation and laughter. And Lucas telling incomprehensible stories about his dreams. After breakfast, Daniel would go to the workshop, and Lucas would insist that Valentina play with him. At first, she had no idea how to play with a 4-year-old. She had forgotten how, or perhaps she had never really known. But Lucas was patient and persistent. He taught her how to race their toy cars on elaborate tracks they built out of books and boxes. Showed her his collection of special stones he had found in different places, each with an important story about where and when he had discovered it. He took her to the tree in the back garden where he had once seen an owl, and they sat in silence waiting to see if it would return. It didn't, but the what was magical nonetheless. Valentina helped Lucas with his summer homework, discovering a talent she hadn't known she possessed for explaining complicated concepts in ways a young child could understand. They used their toy cars to teach math. If you have 3 red cars and 2 blue cars, how many cars do you have in total? Lucas learned quickly and was so proud when he understood something new that he practically glowed. In the afternoons, Valentina would walk to the workshop and spend time with Daniel. At first, she just watched, fascinated by the precision of his movements as he worked on the engines. There was a kind of ballet in the way his hands moved, knowing exactly which tool he needed without looking, understanding mechanical problems as if the engines were speaking to him in a language only he understood. Gradually, Daniel began to teach him things. He showed him how to change a car's oil, patiently explaining each step. He taught him to identify problems by sounds. A knocking sound meant problems with the pistons, a scaling sound indicated that the belt needed replacing, a whining sound suggested electrical problems. Machines have their own language, he told her as they worked together on an engine. You just have to learn to listen to them. Valentina, who had spent years listening to corporate presentations and endless conference calls, discovered that there was something deeply satisfying about this different kind of knowledge. There was something almost meditative about working with her hands, about seeing a problem and solving it physically rather than theoretically. One afternoon, while they were working together on the engine of an old Seat, Valentina got grease all over her hands, up to her elbows. She looked at her perfectly manicured nails, now dirty and broken, her designer blouse stained with oil, and instead of horror, she felt a surge of freedom. You know what, he said suddenly. I think this is the first time in 10 years that I've really gotten my hands dirty. Daniel looked at her curiously. What do you mean? I mean. Valentina searched for the words. My whole career has been about creating things, building things, but all digitally. Code, software, systems. Nothing tangible, nothing you can touch or fix with your own hands. And suddenly I'm here, with grease under my fingernails, fixing a real engine, and it's like coming home in a way. Home. Daniel asked gently. I grew up in Vallecas, Valentina explained. My father was a bricklayer. He built things with his hands. My mother cleaned houses. When he was a child, he would sometimes go with her on Saturdays and help her. We scrubbed floors, cleaned windows. It was hard work, physical work. And he swore that he would never have to do that kind of work again, that he would build a life where my hands would stay clean and soft. But now he realized he lost something along the way. He lost touch with the real world, with tangible things. Everything in my life became abstract, numbers on screens, bank accounts, stocks, investments. Nothing you can hold in your hands. Nothing you can fix when it breaks. Daniel nodded, understanding. That's why he left engineering and became a mechanic. He spent years designing systems on computers, but he never saw them built. He never touched the engines he designed. And after Elena died, he needed something real. I needed to get my hands dirty, to see the results of my work firsthand. And did it help you? Valentina asked. More than he expected, Daniel admitted. There is something healing about fixing things. Something that reminds you that not everything is permanently broken. That with the right tools and enough patience, almost anything can be repaired. They looked at each other over the engine, their hands stained with the same grease, and Valentina felt something happening between them. Not just attraction, thought that was definitely there. But recognition. To people who had lost important things and were finding their way back to themselves, and perhaps to each other. Evenings were Valentina's favorite time. After Lucas fell asleep, she and Daniel would sit on the porch with glasses of cheap wine from the nearby supermarket and talk. They talked about everything. About Valentina's childhood in Vallecas, about how she had learned to program on a computer borrowed from the library. About how Daniel had met Elena at university, two nerdy students in love with literature and mechanics respectively, who had somehow clicked perfectly. They talked about the men who had disappointed Valentina, about how each relationship had ended when she discovered that what they really wanted was her money or her connections or her status, never her. About how Daniel had been so lost after Elena's death that he had seriously considered giving up, until he looked at Lucas and realized he had to. They spoke of abandoned dreams and renewed hopes, of regrets and forgiveness, of everything that two people who barely know each other but somehow understand each other perfectly can say under a Castilian sky full of stars. One night, Lucas surprised them. He was supposedly asleep, but he appeared on the porch in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "I can't sleep," he announced. "I'm overthinking." Daniel smiled and lifted him into his arms. "Thinking about what, champ?" Lucas looked at Valentina with that intensity that little children have when they're considering something important. "Is Valentina going to stay forever?" Valentina felt her breath catching her throat. Daniel tensed slightly. It was the question neither of them had wanted to ask aloud, but that they had obviously both been thinking. "Lucas." Daniel began, but the boy interrupted him. "I just like having her here," Lucas explained with the simple logic of a 4-year-old. "She's fun and plus with me and makes Dad smile more. And when I look at her, it feels like when I hug Dad. Safe, like when you're home. So I thought maybe she could stay and be part of our family. Can she?" Daniel looked at Valentina, his green eyes filled with something she couldn't quite identify. "Hope, perhaps. Or fear. Or both. Honey," Daniel said gently, "those are adult decisions. Valentina has her own life, her own hope. But she could do her work here," Lucas interrupted. "She has her computer and her phone. She could stay with us and keep working. That's how things work now, right? Teacher Carmen said her husband works from home and never goes out, and that's fine." Valentina found herself smiling despite the intensity of the moment. "Lucas has a point," she said slowly. "Technically, I can work from anywhere. So you're going to stay?" Lucas asked, his voice filled with pure hope. "I don't know," Valentina answered honestly, looking at Daniel as she spoke. "It depends on many things. But I promise you this, no matter what happens, I'll always be your friend. You can always count on me. Okay?" Lucas seemed to consider this seriously. Then he nodded. "Okay. But I still hope you'll stay." He yawned widely. "Now I'm really sleepy." Daniel carried him back to bed, and Valentina stood on the porch, her heart beating faster than normal, wondering what she was doing. Wondering if she was ready for this, for whatever this was turning into. When Daniel returned, he sat beside her without speaking for a long moment. Finally, he said, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have put you in that position." "Don't apologize," Valentina said. "Lucas is amazing. He's honest in a way that we adults have forgotten how to be. He's direct, that's for sure," Daniel smiled slightly. "But it's not wrong. You've made me smile more. Both of us, actually. This house has been more alive in the last few days than it has been in 2 years. Daniel." Valentina didn't know what to say, how to express the whirlwind of emotions she felt. "You don't have to say anything," Daniel interrupted gently. "There is no pressure. I just want you to know that, whatever this is, I'm glad your Ferrari broke down. I'm glad Lucas found you. I'm glad you're here." Valentina felt tears stinging her eyes. When was the last time someone had said they were glad she was there, not for what she could do or give or provide, but simply for who she was? "I'm happy too," she whispered. "More than you can imagine." That night, before falling asleep, Valentina made a decision. She didn't know exactly what her life would look like in the coming months or years, but she knew one thing for sure, she wasn't going to let fear keep her from this. She wasn't going to let her past disappointments steal this opportunity for something real. For the first time in years, Valentina Mendoza was willing to take a risk. She was willing to trust again. She was willing to open her heart, even if it meant it might get broken again. Because being here, in this small house in the middle of nowhere, with a widowed mechanic and his 4-year-old son, felt more like being alive than she had ever felt in her entire successful life. And that, he decided, was worth any risk. The Ferrari was repaired on a Tuesday afternoon. Daniel called Valentina to the garage with a triumphant smile, announcing that the car was purring like new, that the Italian parts had finally arrived, and that everything was perfect. Valentina should have felt relief. She should have started packing immediately, thanked them for their hospitality, promised to stay in touch, and returned to her real life in Madrid. That was the logical sequence of events. Instead, she felt panicked. "That's great," he said, his voice sounding hollow even to his own ears. "I guess I can leave tomorrow then." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "I suppose so," he finally said, but there was something in his eyes that made her wonder if he felt the same panic as she did. That night, after Lucas fell asleep, Valentina and Daniel sat on the porch as they had every night for the past week. But this timid silence was heavy, filled with unspoken words. Finally, Valentina mastered the courage that had taken her from Vallecas to the top of the business world, and spoke out. "I don't want to leave," she said bluntly. "I don't know what that means or how it would work, but I know I don't want to leave." Daniel turned to her, his green eyes shining even in the darkness. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying." Valentina took a deep breath. "I'm saying that I've spent 10 years building an empire and feeling empty. And then I spend a week here, in this place that should be an inconvenience, with people I barely know, and I feel more whole than I've ever felt in my entire life. I'm saying that when I look at Lucas, I feel something I never thought I'd feel. And when I look at you." She stopped, her heart pounding so hard she was sure I could hear it. "When you look at me." Daniel encouraged her, moving closer. "When I look at you, I feel that maybe love isn't impossible for me after all. That maybe I can trust again. That maybe I deserve to be happy, not just successful." Daniel took her hand, that hand now calloused from working in the shop, and held it as if it were precious. "Valentina, for 2 years I've been telling myself that love was something I once had and lost. That my chance at happiness died with Elena. That all I could do was raise my son and find peace in my work. And then you come along, this incredible woman in a beat-up Ferrari, and challenge everything I thought I knew about myself. What are we doing?" Valentina whispered. "I think," Daniel said slowly, "that we're giving ourselves a chance. If you want." "I'm scared," Valentina admitted. "Men before it, they always wanted something from me. My money, my connections, my status. And when they realized I wasn't going to give them as much as they expected, they left. I don't know if I can go through that again. Look at this place," Daniel gestured around. "Valentina, I don't want your money. I don't need your connections. I have a small workshop that barely provides for me, a modest house, and a wonderful son. That's my life, and I'm at peace with it. If you're looking for someone who wants something from you, it's not me. All I want is to get to know you. You, the person I've been getting to know this week. Not the CEO, not the millionaire." Used Valentina. The tears Valentina had been holding back finally fell. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to just be Valentina. I've been the successful Valentina Mendoza for so long that I don't know who I am without that." "Then let's find out together," Daniel said, wiping his tears with his thumb. "No rush, no pressure. Just, let's see what happens." And then, under the stars of the Castilian sky, on the porch of a modest house in the middle of nowhere, Daniel Navarro kissed Valentina Mendoza. And it was the most honest, most real kiss she had ever experienced. There was no calculation behind it, no hidden agenda. Used to people who had been broken in different ways, meeting at the exact moment when they were both ready to yell. Valentina didn't leave the next day. Or the day after. She didn't sell her company or abandon her career, but she did make changes. She hired an operational CEO to handle the day-to-day operations. She sold the penthouse in Salamanca that had never felt like home and bought a larger house near the workshop, a house with space for a family that was learning to be one. He divided his time between Madrid, where he still had important meetings and board responsibilities, and this lost village in Castile, where he learned a little more each day about how to simply live instead of just exist. Lucas was the first to call her mom. It was 6 months after their first meeting, on an ordinary February morning while they were having breakfast. He simply said it, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Ma'am, can you pass me the milk?" Valentina froze, her heart stopping for a second. She looked at Daniel, who had tears in his eyes. Then she looked at Lucas, who was patiently waiting for his milk, completely unaware of the monumental moment she had just created. "Of course, darling," she managed to say, passing him the milk with trembling hands. Daniel married Valentina in a small ceremony in the garden of their new house a year after his Ferrari broke down. It wasn't a glamorous wedding like you see in magazines. It was simple, intimate, with only close family and friends from their village. Lucas was the page boy, proud in his little suit, carrying the rings with extreme care. When the officiant asked for their vows, Valentina spoke from the heart. "Daniel, I didn't believe in destiny until my car broke down on that road. I didn't believe I could trust again until your son took my hand. I didn't believe I deserved real love until you showed me what that meant. I promised to love you and Lucas with all that I have. I promised to choose this life, our life, every single day." Daniel, with tears streaming freely down his face, replied, "Valentina, Elena taught me what love was the first time. You taught me that it's possible to love again, in a different way but just as deeply. I promise to value you for who you are, not for what you have. I promise to build a home with you where our hearts are safe. I promise that when things break, we'll fix them together." Lucas, unable to contain himself, shouted, "And I promise to be the best son in the world." Everyone laughed through their tears, and the officiant declared that he had never seen a more beautiful family. 2 years later, Sofia was born. A little girl with her father's green eyes and her mother's fierce determination. Valentina experienced a natural birth in the small hospital in the nearby town, squeezing Daniel's hand so tightly that she later joked they need physical therapy. But when they placed that teeny creature in her arms, when she felt that warm, perfect weight, she knew this was what she had been searching for her whole life without even realizing it. Lucas adored his little sister. He became the most devoted big brother, insisting on helping with everything, from changing diapers to singing lullabies en made upon the spot. He showed her his toy cars and promised that when she grew up he would teach her how to drive for real, which horrified and touched Valentina in equal measure. Valentina's life was completely transformed. She no longer worked 60 hours a week. She turned down meetings that interfered with important moments, Lucas' school play, Sofia's first words, family dinners around the table where they shared the stories of the day. She still ran her company, still made important decisions, was still brilliant and successful. But now that was only part of her identity, not her whole identity. She was a mother, a wife, a neighbor in a small town, a volunteer at Lucas' school, a friend to other mothers with whom she had coffee on Tuesdays. The Ferrari remained in the special garage Daniel had built. Valentina occasionally took it for drives along the back roads of Castile, feeling the engine's power and remembering the woman she had been. But it was no longer her most prized possession. Now she had infinitely more valuable things. Sometimes, when he drove along the road where it had all begun, he would stop at the same spot where the car had broken down years before. He would look down at the dirt road that led to the garage, now thriving thanks to quiet investments that Daniel had eventually discovered but never mentioned, and he would smile. One afternoon, years later, Lucas, now a tall, handsome 14-year-old who had inherited his father's green eyes and his adoptive mother's determination, accompanied her on one of those rides. They sat on the hood of the Ferrari, exactly where Valentina had been sitting that first day, and Lucas said, "You know, I've always wondered what would have happened if I hadn't met you that day." "What do you think would have happened?" Valentina asked. Lucas considered it seriously. "I think eventually someone else would have come along and helped you get to your meeting. You would have gotten your car fixed at some garage in Toledo. You would have gone back to your normal life. And Dad and I would have gone on with ours. And we all would have been fine, I suppose, but. Valentina encouraged him. But we wouldn't have been complete, Lucas finished. It's like our family was waiting for you without even knowing it. Like there was an empty space shaped exactly like you, and we just needed you to show up to fill it. Valentina felt tears sting in her eyes. You know what's funny? I felt the same way. There was an empty space inside me, exactly the shape of you. I just didn't know it was there until I found you. So I guess you were right, Lucas said with a smile. Dad was able to fix it. Fix the Ferrari? No, Lucas looked at her with those wise eyes that now understood so much. Fix your heart. And his. And help me fix mine, the little piece that's been broken since Mama Elena left. Papa's always been good at fixing things. I just needed the right pieces. Valentina hugged him, this boy who wasn't so little anymore, who had started it all by taking her hand with absolute trust when she needed him most. I love you, Lucas. I hope you know that. It don't matter that I didn't give birth to you. You are my son in every way that matters. I know, Lucas said simply. I've always known. From that first day. That's why I took your hand and led you home. I knew you belonged with us. They drove back home as the sunset over the Castilian countryside, painting the sky orange, pink, and purple. At home, Daniel would be preparing dinner. Sofia would probably be drawing at the kitchen table, creating masterpieces to stick on the refrigerator alongside all their other treasures. This was her life now. Not perfect, because nothing in life is, but real and authentic and full of the kind of love she had never thought possible for herself. Valentina Mendoza had learned the most important lesson of her life on a back road in the middle of nowhere, that success without human connection is empty. That love is worth more than all the money in the world. That families are created not only by blood, but by choice and commitment, and by showing up every day. That sometimes breakdowns lead us exactly where we need to be. And when a 4-year-old tells you my dad can fix it, it could be talking about much more than a car. It could be talking about entire lifetimes.